What I would tell any entrepreneur is I think you definitely have to look at yourself as always competing with your own self to be better. You don't need to be better than anybody else. Just be better than you used to be. People know at Fortune, we're 33 years old. And what I say at every annual meeting every year is we still run it like a startup. Not because we need to be better than anybody else, but because we want to create a better brand that would put our own company out of business if we went out and competed against us.
In today's episode of the Hero of the Hour podcast, our host, Mark B. Murphy, has an insightful conversation with Bernie Stoltz, founder and CEO of Fortune Management, Alex Sadusky, CEO of TruBlu Dental, and Bob Martino, an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. They'll each talk about what a hero means to them and how they're a hero to their clients. Get ready to learn about the importance of creating a synergy between great companies, the key secret to becoming a successful entrepreneur, and last but best, the importance of having meaningful connections in your workplace. Thank you so much and enjoy.
Hey, I'm Mark Murphy. I'm the founder and CEO of Northeast Private Client Group and the author of 3 books, with my newest book being The Ultimate Investment. I want to thank all 3 of you guys for joining my podcast. And we call it the Heroes Podcast because 35 years ago, I decided I wanted to be a hero to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinking people, and then specifically entrepreneurial thinking dentists. And I built a business on surrounding myself with people that wanted to be a hero to the same group. And with us today, I have the founder and CEO of Fortune Management, Bernie Stoltz, the largest executive coaching, communications, practice management company in the world for dentists and veterinarians. And I've got Alex Sadusky, the CEO of TruBlu Dental, which is giving private practitioner dentists and small DSOs a level playing field against the big DSOs. And then I've got Bob Martino, who I don't know how to introduce because he's the CEO of so many companies. It'd take up the whole podcast just to talk about all the companies he represents. But he is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur. And I welcome all 3 of you to the podcast. I think in addition to the viewers and listeners, I also want to let you know that these are 3 very, very close friends of mine as well. Bernie, how do you define a hero, and how are you a hero to your clients?
Well, I think defining heroes can go in a lot of different directions. One of the first heroes, believe it or not, I don't even think I've ever talked to you about this, but one of my first heroes was a guy who you guys have all heard of, Lee Iacocca. Yeah. Remember Lee Iacocca? In fact, he just died just a few years ago at the ripe age of 95. But he was one of the first guys that really inspired me into entrepreneurialism. Amazing guy. I mean, really put Ford back on the map. The creator of the Mustang, the Pinto, the Lincoln Continental, and then of course, I think if you do it once in business, you're lucky. You do it more than once, you got something. And so, what does he do 20 years later? He turns Chrysler completely around. But I read his book, Iacocca, and I read that probably when I was, it had to be late 70s, so a long time ago. And I'd recommend to your listeners, Mark, still a great read today. But what I loved about it was just the ability, and something I put in my new book, it's okay to do good by doing good things for others. And that has really, heroism for me has been all about that. You and I wrote a book that speaks to it as well together, the win-win outcome, right? And, one of the things that I believe is that there never has to be a loser in business. I think too many people today are playing a zero-sum game. They think for them to win, someone else has to lose. That's a horrible way to run a company. It's a horrible way to live a life. And I think that what we're trying to prove with the companies that are all on board here today is that no one's got to lose. We can do great things. and we can even create some synergy between great companies. I mean, Fortune Management, which was the sixth company that I did, speaking of entrepreneurialism, I was trying to find myself in my 20s. And so I had, by the time I was 30 years old, I'd created 5 companies. They were all pretty good at making money, but they had no purpose to them. Very transactional businesses, which was probably why I continued to pursue, to seek, but Fortune was a whole different game. That was about the power of purpose. And what we do today and what we've done for 33 years is help doctors to turn their dreams into their realities. And I think that's heroism at the greatest extent. And I get so juiced when I see another doctor succeed, or any of our business alliances. It's just winning feels good. So that'd be my opening comments to you, Mark.
Hey, Bob, who's a hero to you? How do you define that?
Wow. Wow. I mean, my first heroes are my parents, and because we grew up poor. I always say that I didn't know I was poor until my dad brought home government cheese. And the government doesn't do many things well, but they do cheese really well. I mean, it was some damn good cheese. I mean, it really was. So, but that was an impact on me that I'm like, well, why are we getting government cheese? But I didn't realize we were poor, and these people did nothing for their whole life but live for their kids, and sent 4 kids through college, and when they passed, and I'm at the funeral line, and everyone that is there said they were the nicest people I've ever met. They were and I'm thinking, wow, kind of what Bernie said, if you can go through and someone says that was one of the nicest people I've ever met, and still do business with them. I think that's so. I think that way in my life, that shaped my life. But I think business wise, I think my partner Kenny Wilson, who got me into Fortune. I think guys like Bernie, Paul Bass, Gary McLeod, Tony Robbins, all those that started Fortune to begin with, because I've been in Fortune since 1990, and not only did those things help me in dentistry, but it's the same concepts that we learned at Fortune in dentistry that I've taken to other businesses, like an airplane maintenance business and an OraCare, which is a mouthwash. It's the same concept, communication, treat patients, clients the way you want to be treated. My goal is, when I go into partnership with someone, is for that partner to feel like I gave more than they did. I want, and if I can get a partner that feels the same way, then all of a sudden, man, we're taking off. So that's the idea. And I think we have a lot of heroes along the way, and I keep getting them. And some of those heroes today aren't someone that are running companies. Some of those heroes that I see today are like my staff. I have great vice presidents. I have a great staff at OraCare. It's those people that are doing the hard work. I might come up with an idea, but they're the ones that are actually doing it. So those are my heroes.
Alex, how about you? How do you define a hero, or who's a hero to you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of, obviously you have the emotional side. You start to think of family and others who've been around you a long time and helped you through difficult challenges or opportunities. But I look at it, it's like people who've made a difference in my life, or people I know who've overcome just incredible odds or obstacles in their health or other things that they're faced with. But like, I kind of go back, Bob, I'm with you a little bit. I go back to high school. I went to a parochial school in my final 2 years, and I had the pleasure of having a calculus teacher. His name was Colonel Robert Sadusky. He was a retired SR-71 Black Hawk pilot. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, those things flew, I think, Mach 3 in the super high altitude. But he retired from the military and decided he wanted to give back even more and teach calculus to a bunch of kids. But Bob had 2 signs in his room In the upper left-hand corner, it said patience. In the right corner, it said think. And what he taught us was, unless you're doing rocket science, it's not rocket science. Be patient and think. You can kind of figure out everything. And that model kind of really attributed to kind of my philosophy of, chew through concrete. You can get there. The other side of it was, obviously in a parochial school, it was a lot about giving, but it wasn't the giving for your own benefit. It was the best type of giving is when you're able to help others with no expectation or of recognition or anything in return. And I was fortunate enough to really have that philosophy ingrained in me. And so when I started in the professional world, I was like you, Bob, I was always looking for ways to lead with helping someone else with no return. And I can tell you, it may have taken over a decade or 15 years before that philosophy really came true on the, oh my gosh, look what happened. But I can say today, thanks to all the friendships we have here, as well as others, I wouldn't be where I'm at now if I didn't have that abundant philosophy as a very young professional. And then on the entrepreneurial side, one of my heroes, and the guy, I had lunch with him for 30 minutes. He probably has no idea who I am. And the reason is he completely changed my mindset with regard to owning and operating businesses. And this guy's name was Wade Moose. And I can guarantee probably no one here knows who he is, but every single one of you and probably 90% of America has used his product who has a home. He invented the ADT controller that's on your wall. He sold that to GE for the security, but he ended up having like 15 businesses. He had an aerospace business, you name it, he had it. But we were having lunch and he looked at me and goes, "You're not an entrepreneur." And it was a little bit of an awkward lunch, to say the least. I'm like, "Why is that?" He goes, "You did pretty well in high school, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You went to a good college, right?" I said, "Yeah." "Got good grades?" I'm like, "Yeah." "I bet you got a great job coming out of college." I'm like, "Yeah, I did." "Paid you really well, right?" "Yeah." "I bet you met a beautiful wife and got a house and had kids." So, he just kept going through. And he goes, "And Mark, this kind of comes back to your book." He goes, "You cannot be an entrepreneur." I said, "Why is that, Wade?" He goes, "Because you have too much to lose." He goes, "You need to be willing to lose it all to be successful." And ironically, I think there was so much wisdom in what he said. So that changed my mindset on what does it take to be an entrepreneur? And you really have to be fully committed. And I took that advice and I'm here today because of it. And the second is it really changed the dialogue I had in myself with others. We always want to mentor back to the next generation of youth coming out of school. Is like, hey, it's good to want to do these things, but this is the pot stakes, right? This is what you got to be willing to commit to accomplish. So that's kind of my perspective. Couple teachers and an entrepreneur.
I got to tell you, Alex, I agree with that. The reason I'm a serial entrepreneur is I had nothing to lose. and that helped when we started. And Bob, I can't also agree with you more in that all of my companies run with Fortune as the foundation of their technology. Bernie, you've coached thousands of entrepreneurs for the last 30 plus years. What can you tell me? What can you tell us about entrepreneurs, or what can you tell us about the people that might be watching this and saying, "Hey, I need help"?
Well, here's what I think. The way I've always looked at life, and I'd ask you three the same question, which is, when were the happiest times ever in your life? And if you really think about it, it's when you're doing two things. When you're growing and building and chasing and pursuing and creating. And then on the other side, it's when you're serving others. And so for me, business has been that my whole life, and by the way, I mean, I grew up broke too, man, and no money. So I had nothing to lose. So I was an entrepreneur from right out of the get-go, and didn't even go to college. I went to a little community college for a couple of years and really decided that it was going to be a waste of my time. And I was into shortcuts early in my life. And the shortest cut I took was right into business and right into owning a business by the time I was 21 years old. And I never looked back. But what I would tell any entrepreneur is I think you definitely have to look at yourself as always competing with your own self to be better. You don't need to be better than anybody else. Just be better than you used to be. People know at Fortune, we're 33 years old. And what I say at every annual meeting every year is we still run it like a startup, not because we need to be better than anybody else, but because we want to create a better brand that would put our own company out of business if we went out and competed against it. So it's always about growing. It's always about expanding. The other thing about business is I think great entrepreneurs love the concept of business. They love the fact that it creates jobs, that it creates, and good companies serve people, right? I mean, good companies have purpose, they serve, they provide a service or a product or whatever that is, but they employ people, they make the world turn, man. So, and it pains me sometimes when, whether it be the press or you've got people picking on business, picking on independent business people. And the fact of the matter is that's what makes this country great. And if we don't have that, what do we have? Socialism? So I love what business does, what it can do, what it does for communities, what it does for the world. And it's for me, it's always been a vehicle for how I grow and how I give back. So that to me, I think, and I've learned to evolve in business. When I was younger, it was, my claim was, I'll outwork you. I'll get up earlier than you and I'll stay up later and I'll work you. And now what I've learned is that, as you get more into leadership, then it's about servant leadership. It's about leading from the back. It's about delegating more to more people. So that's been fun in business too.
I used to think, Bernie, I did the math that I used to think if you got in the office at 6:30 instead of 9, you could get an extra 7 weeks of work in more than a guy that got in at 9 o'clock. And although I never got outworked in my life, I'm getting too old to work 24/7. Bob, we've talked a lot about it. I mean, I think Einstein was the one who quoted this, where he said, just because a fish can't climb a tree doesn't mean they're not a genius. And we've talked a lot recently about finding genius in your organizations. You've got all kinds of different companies. How do you find genius?
Well, that's a great question, and I think one of the things that we talked about genius. Pat Lencioni has a new book, The Working Genius, and which is you can take an assessment, and he breaks it down in different things, and I think sometimes as entrepreneurs we look for other people like us. And that's not who we need. You know what I mean? We're the idea people, but we need people to galvanize. We need cheerleaders. We need people that will say, yes, let's go out and do it. We need people that says, I wonder how that would work if you did this. So you need different people on your team. And I think sometimes you tend to want to get the same people. Like for us, I think we're all probably pretty good at ideas. If us four started a company, we'd have great ideas. I don't know if we get it off the ground, you know what I mean? Because we need other people, right? And I think at one time we were those people. Don't get me wrong. We just like you said, we all said, and I think we all have that same mindset. I'm just going to outwork you. But as the bigger you get, that just doesn't work anymore. I tell dentists all the time, I have 7 practices. They always say, hey, how do you do it? All this. I said, you can only make so much money with these, but with this is unlimited. And to be able to use this, you have to utilize other people and their strengths. So I think you constantly got to look at it, and they don't always have to be exactly like you. And I think in fact, you probably don't want them like you. You want to look for other things. And I think that's very important in all of our companies to make sure everyone has a role, and that role isn't necessarily exactly what the way you think.
One of the things I see, Bob, is I see that somebody's got to make it up, which is what the 4 of us do, is make it up. Right. But all of us have in our companies guys that make it happen, and then we got other people that make it reoccur. It's pretty simple. Alice, you were going to say something, but
no, Bob. Yeah, Bob's hit on something, and this is going to go back 2 decades. So there's a firm, Mark, you may have heard of them. It's called Jeff Smart, GH Smart. Mm-hmm. Jeff's dad did it. It's a big time consulting firm that it's got psychologists, you name it, and they do executive evaluations. And they work on behalf of, I'd say, the majority of the big bulge bracket private equity groups in the country. And Bob, to your point, because I remember talking to Jeff, and ironically, when I hired him, I said, here's the deal, I'm going to hire you. But if you ever do a review on me, you need to lie and say I'm a good guy, right? And then he kind of chuckled. But what he would do is they would make an assessment of you. And then they would tell you, based on your strengths and weaknesses, here are the types of people you need to surround yourself with in your executive team. If you do not do this, you will fail. And they were able to correlate success to that to the point of like 95+% on the assessment in the team. So I totally concur with you on Bob on that. The second thing was, as founders of businesses, our goal should always be to grow the business and get us out of a job. Because the reality is that I think McKinsey & Company did a bunch of research on this. The skills necessary to kind of create and go through those different phases of growth are very different skills. Ultimately, too, when you get to a multi-billion-dollar company with 15,000 employees, right? So you either need to evolve that position through your own personal growth and the growth of your team, or you need to seed that to the kind of the next level of leadership to grow it. And I think, unfortunately, that's one of the things that does hold back some small businesses. You see it more in the family-owned businesses because it usually goes second generation, third generation. There's a point. It's not that the third generation was any less competent or great than the first. It's just the business has outgrown what they bring to the table, right? So I think it gets a bad knock. It's like, oh, it's going bad because now third generation. No, it just needs another level of capability, because the reality is what we do, most people have already done at some point in time, right? So you can find people with that experience.
Hey, Alex, you were at the top of the corporate food chain. You were a senior officer at a major international company. What did you see at TruBlu, or what did you see in yourself where you said, I want to do this entrepreneurial startup? Because in the beginning, there was quite a lot of risk.
Yeah, I think, Mark, I think it's a couple of things, right? And you know, I knew from my time in consulting, I like, and Bernie, you made a comment, when are you the happiest? And I went back and looked at my life, because I've done a variety of things. And what I was always able to correlate, by the way, it never correlated with when I made the most money. I was always the happiest when I was doing great things with great people. And I had kind of reached a point where I was ready to kind of do something different and make an impact, right? I'm getting up there in years, losing a little bit of hair, and I was ready for that kind of one last thing. We talk about underdogs, and Mark, you said something about hero. Like, I want to be a hero to the underdog, right? My grandfather, never met him. He was a small town butcher in Pennsylvania. The only time you went to his grocery store is when you didn't have money, because he'd give it to you for free and you could pay it off later. When you had money, you go to the big box, right? The big box put the little guy out of business, right? And caused a lot of harm in the community. My goal and my why for TruBlu is all we want to do is level that playing field for the independent dentist, right? We talked about corporations. You know, what's kind of crazy is if you have private equity money or corporate money and you put a bunch of doctors together, you're allowed to do things legally and regulatorily wise that independent dentists can't do. You can get paid more for the dentistry you do, not necessarily better dentistry, than an independent dentist who's been in 30 years, because you satisfy certain requirements, right? And it's kind of an unfair playing field for the independents. And that's a structural thing that I would say, you know, the government's gotten wrong, right? Small businesses create growth. And Bernie, to your point, I love when you always talk about helping businesses. One of the biggest cons in dental is, you know, folks have convinced dentists that they're dentists and they run a practice. They own a business. Any entrepreneur who ever created a business didn't have to sell that business when they wanted to quit flipping burgers or being on the front line. They brought in management. They took on additional investors. They kept what they grew. But in dentistry and vet and all these other niche medical, you know, our friends are being told, no, you don't want to practice anymore. You need to sell. And Mark, to your point, invest in you. They know how to make money doing that one thing. They're excellent at it. Why should they sell, take pennies on the dollar, and walk away from what they're so great at? So I loved your book. You know, the greatest investment is you, right? I mean, it's just every chapter kind of just reinforced that, right?
Well, yeah.
Amen. Go ahead, Bernie.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the things that I've enjoyed doing, you know, with our companies is teaching doctors. And Bob, you said it. You said, you know, you can only make so much money with these, and you know, it's really one of the problems, and I'll call it a problem, a challenge, that every professional since the beginning of time has been plagued with. I don't care if you're the best paid attorney, the top brain surgeon, a dentist, a CPA, architect. I don't care what it is. The bottom line, you can make a lot of money trading time for dollars. But the fact of the matter is it's still a job, to job. And so one of the things one of the many purposes is to show doctors that they really can grow an enterprise, that they don't have to trade time for dollars. And Bob Martino is a living example of that. Runs 7 successful, high quality 7 practices, and he hasn't been a wet fingered dentist for, God, I got to think, what, 25 years, Bob?
21.
Yeah. And so that's the cool thing is to show professionals that they can do that. And to Alex's point, show them that they don't have to sell the goose that's laying the golden eggs, as we say, right?
You know,
Well,
Bernie,
well, I just want to. That brings up a great point, and I want to elaborate on this a little bit. Is that when you're successful in one area, it lets you fail in other areas. In other words, once you start, a company and it goes successful and you have income coming in and everything, you then can go out and do other things. And if they fail, they fail. I still have this success. So success for me gives me freedom. It gives me freedom to fail. It gives me freedom to do things that maybe I wouldn't do. And, I love to talk about my successes. Hey, I've had failures too. I had a telemedicine company before any of you knew what telemedicine was. Why aren't we the number one telemedicine company? That's a long story. It's obviously not success. But you know what? It was a risk that I took, and maybe it's a failure. Maybe it's not. We're still in the process. But what I'm telling you is, when you succeed in one area, that gives you so much freedom to be able to go out and fail in other areas.
Bob, it's so funny. I was saying that, especially on the marketing or business development side, I could give a list of things that I spent, say, $10,000 or more on that failed miserably. But if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have done 2 or 3 other things that helped us make millions and millions of dollars. And so I couldn't agree more. Bernie, we wrote our first book together. I think it's now 5+ years ago, the Deal Maker's Guide to Buying and Selling Dental Practices, the Win-Win Guide. But my favorite book for 2022 was The Fortune Recipe, the essentials to I want to make sure I get the title right because I want people to buy it. It's The Fortune Recipe, Essential Ingredients for Creating Your Best Life. That's the best book I read in 2022. If you haven't read it, what would somebody take away from that book? Why should they buy it, and what would they get out of that book? Because you spent a lot of time writing it.
Yeah, I did. And what I tell people, my powerful why to writing that book was I wanted to pay it forward. I just felt like if I could share 40 or 50 principles that have helped me to shape my life and how I live my life. And I'm a really grateful guy. In fact, the very first chapter of the book is titled Gratitude. And the last chapter of the book is Mahalo, which means with ultimate gratitude and respect, right? So it's all about that. But I just, if any, and I'm not saying I got it all figured out. In fact, I want to digress for a second back to failures for a second, because that also is, I think, the difference between an entrepreneur and someone who just works for somebody else their whole life. If you really think about it, I don't know that people who work for other people have really ever experienced failure, not with their own money, not with the, I remember sleepless nights and no money to do this or that or whatever. And I think the great entrepreneurs are willing to talk about their failures. They learn from them, which makes me better. Every time I fail, man, it's like, I don't do that again. You know, that Ray Dalio in his book Principles, there's a little quote in there that says failure plus reflection equals evolution. And that's what great entrepreneurs do. But as far as the book, Mark, I don't have it all figured out, but I just knew that if I could put, before I was too old to remember them all, I wanted to leave something that people knew I stood for. It was how I ran my life, how I do run my life. And if anybody, any young person or business person or anybody in my own company, originally I wrote that was not a book. It was actually about 40 PowerPoint slides that I gave as a keynote in my own company. Yeah, it was a fire and brimstone speech. And it evolved into the next year we were at DS World, and I actually turned it into about a 2-hour lecture to probably 500 doctors. And Fred Joyle comes up and he goes, "That's a book, man." He goes, "That's a book." And so if it causes anybody in their life to do a little pivot or a big pivot, then it was worth it, man. And I think the other thing that's been great, waffling back and forth on the entrepreneurialism, I decided at a very early age that, first of all, I'm not good with my hands. I could never be a dentist. I could never work in an area that big. I don't know how they do it. But I decided early on that the two most powerful tools that I have, and I think most people have if they're really willing to pursue it, is your mind and your voice. I have changed more lives and done better work with two things: my mind and my voice. And I think that's been really cool, and I think you can do that as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I remember meeting all three of you the first time I met you or spent some real time with you. And I got stories I maybe too long to tell, but I remember, hey, I want to have each of you in my life from that moment. And I remember, Bob, when we first got together, we were at a Fortune kind of corporate challenge scavenger hunt. And I remember we did two things: that we used our brain power to win the scavenger hunt. I also remember that you and I and our team laughed so hard, so hard for 4 hours. We had more fun than you can have with your clothes on. And I go, this is the kind of guy I want to have in my life. And then you always surprise me. And one of the things that's been the most inspiring thing, there's a couple of things you've done that to me are really unique. One is, I'd love you to tell people about Freedom Day and how you came to that conclusion. And then the second thing I'd like to talk about is you took a fledgling company that was ready to go out of business, and you've turned it into a powerhouse in oral care, the deoxychloride mouthwash. I'd love you to talk about any of those two stories, because I think they're so powerful.
Well, and I've listened, that is the day at the Greenbrier, thanks to Fortune. That was I look back, I agree. Just such an enjoyable day meeting you. You were hilarious. Cheated a little bit, but I like that. Freedom Day, is a day that kind of was inspired by a song by Lone Star. It's called "Messages from Home," and basically, my dad was in the military, but it was before I was born, and so I didn't really know how much the families sacrifice. I guess I knew it, but it didn't hit home. And then hearing those messages and going, "I hope you come home. I hope you don't." I can't imagine, at the time I had kids and going to sports, I couldn't imagine if my wife had to go overseas. What would I do? And so not only military sacrifice, but their families do. So I said, I need to do something. And so I said, I'm going to give them free services. I'm going to give the military and the families free services one day a year, and we're going to call it Freedom Day. And this all happened in my shower. So I got out and I told my staff, and my staff was like, "That's great. Let's go for it." And it just happened to be the next month I had a Fortune meeting, a Platinum Circle meeting. So I go there and I start telling these people, and which was the wrong thing to do, because they're all like, "Oh, oh yes, let's jump on. And they jumped on so much that I had another job. And that job was running Freedom Day. And it's now a 501c. And we have a national director, Wendy Boyce, who does a great job at it. And I stepped away, let someone that knows how to run it better than I do. And it's basically a day that dentists and other businesses around the nation give back to military veterans, their families. And we've done over $38 million in the last 10 years of free services. And you know, and again, I have to thank everyone on here. Everyone's been part of that. Again, one of these things is when you have a crazy idea, but you have crazy friends that jump on board and go, hey, yeah, that inspires you. You know, that inspires you to say, hey, yeah, we can go to the next level. It's hard to fight a battle by yourself. So you have to be, you know, crazy enough to have the idea, but those next people that are crazy enough to follow you, those are the important people in your life.
Think about that though, Bob, right? You know, what you just described, and it's amazing, right? Was a relatively small decision, right? You took a shower and you said, I'm going to give away dentistry one day to some incredible veterans and their families. And I think you kind of undersold it, by the way. For all of you who don't know, Freedom Day is now turning into, I believe, Freedom Week next year.
Yeah. There's
so talk about, I mean, exponential growth there. That's amazing.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, I think TruBlu is the most exciting thing I've seen in dentistry, if not ever, in a long, long time. Most people don't know about it. Tell people why we're so excited about TruBlu.
I'd be happy to do so, Mark.
What is it?
You know, yeah, for me, it's a platform company. So we're not a DSO. We have nothing to do with a dental practice's equity or control of their operations. All we've done is created a platform designed around leveling the playing field for the independent dentist. And what are we doing? We're creating solutions, services, and products that they can use to survive and thrive in this competitive environment, right? Solutions that increase access to dental care, solutions that reduce costs in their operations so they can invest in their business and drive exponential growth. And we have a variety of solutions. One of them is a platform called TruBlu Direct. It's kind of like a membership model. You pay $99, you can cancel anytime you want, right? So you talk about a small decision. This is about one of the most simple small decisions you'll ever be faced with. $99, you can cancel whenever you want, no purchasing commitments, no volume commitments. But when you pay that $99, you get access to a suite of vendor programs. And just as an example, Mark, one of your clients signed up and they saved $250,000 a year now through a host of those vendor programs. Right. And you talk about, oh, maybe it's only $250,000, maybe it's only 200,000. But the reality is it's more than that, because they would have to produce $1 million in production to create that same cash flow. So I would argue there's nothing in their life they can do in 5 minutes that would unlock more potential upside than that. But then you go even a step further and say, Mark, what could you and your amazing team do with an extra $200,000 a year in cash flow for that family, for that business, for those generations? What could that business do from a growth and investment standpoint, right? So I look at it, I'm super excited because what we do every day is try to add 10 times value. If we can't add 10 times value for what we're doing, I don't want to do it, right? And the good news is I don't need everybody to use it. I want you to use what we have if it's helpful to you and if it adds value to you. But every practice is different. Some of our solutions might not be a great fit. Other ones would be amazing. We were fortunate enough to support Freedom Day with one that's coming out. It's not public, but by the time this podcast is released, I'm sure it will be. TruBlu Social Smiles. It's revolutionizing social selling and the power of an authentic testimonial. What has everyone learned? These really high-powered, super expensive, curated videos, no one believes them. But a 15, 30-second heartfelt experience from a consumer or a patient means all the world, right? And so we were able to do that with Freedom Day, with vets telling their story, right? And we look forward to supporting that because our goal there is to help Bob and Wendy and the team at Freedom Day do even more dentistry. Look, I mean, Bob, it's personal for me, right? My dad served in the Army for 22 years and the CIA for 17 after that, and I only knew 15 of it, right? I've seen firsthand the sacrifices families make and the sacrifices individuals make to serve this country, right? Those are heroes. We're back to your original question. But we have a host of solutions, Mark. We'll continue to expand and add those solutions. Fortune Management is a strategic partner on us. Bernie's been kind to lend his time, his intellect, his enthusiasm, and mentor me as the chairman of the board. And his organization deeply cares about the preservation of private care and private practice dentistry. So we're all pulling in the same direction. And thank you to you and your team, right? For us, it's about exposure, right? This morning, I had an introduction from one of your colleagues, Ben, to a doctor who had never heard about us. In the first 2 minutes, she saw, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars of value, thanks to someone being kind enough like Ben saying, hey, you should talk to these folks, right? I think that's the benefit of how we help each other when we're doing great things. That's the power of the ecosystem.
I got to tell you, it's pretty. Go ahead, Bob.
Let me just talk a little bit about TruBlu, kind of overall big concept wise. I have 7 practices. They call me a mini DSO. Okay. Because I have 7 practices, I pay less supplies than the guy across the street from me. Is that fair? It's an unfair advantage that I have. I can have a call center. I can do things. There's things that I can do by having 7 practices that a single practice can't do. The field is not level. Now, maybe I created that field, but it doesn't matter who did it. The field's not level. What TruBlu does is they level that field. So now when you sign up for TruBlu, you get the same prices that I do as a mini DSO so that's the whole concept, I think, in a box, is that the DSOs, whether the mini DSOs, big, have an unfair advantage over the private practice, where TruBlu comes in and goes, hold on a second, let me give you the same things. We're going to build this network of private owned practices so that we can do the things. And I think that's what I see in TruBlu.
Yeah, and here's what I'd add about TruBlu is, here's the ultimate powerful why. It is absolutely about the preservation of private practitioner dentistry. The last thing in the world that this country needs is for dentistry to go the way of medicine. Medicine, I saw it 40 years ago. My wife was a practice administrator for 4 cardiologists that were making 7 figures a year 40 years ago. But because of the way it was set up, they didn't have time to manage their businesses. They didn't protect their profession. And of course, it's like Jim Rome used to say, hey, if you don't have a plan for yourself, someone else does. And of course, the unholy triumvirate of big pharma, hospital administrations, and the insurance industry were right there to take over medicine. And it is broken today, which saddens me, because it's broken in a time when we have more technology and more knowledge about how to keep people well and alive. So the whole key with TruBlu is, let's make sure that the dentists themselves have the ability to continue to set the standard of care. Set the standard of care. And so Bob's got 7, call them a mini DSO, but we're not down on DSOs if they're dentist run and they're controlled by the dentist. Where we have an issue is when it's run by private equity, or it's run by outside investors, and it becomes a very transactional business. So the core powerful why to TruBlu is to keep the standard of care where it needs to be with private practitioner dentists. And at the same time, they become more profitable. They're more competitive. It's absolutely a good thing.
Yeah. And they invest in technology, and they take great care of their teams, right? I mean, Bob, I know your team loves you to death, right? You have a great team, but it's beyond just the team. It's the lives that you change in those employees. It's the kids you put through college. It's the people Mark, you guys help with their homes. Want to talk about making an impact? I never hear that story in the corporate world, but you hear it in small business every day of the week.
One of the things I keep seeing is that, most people think 1 + 1 = 2, and they make decisions in a siloed approach. They make financial decisions, business decisions, life decisions in a siloed approach. And for most people, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, because of barriers and friction and everything. 1+1 usually equals 1.5. The thing I hope people who are watching this take away from this podcast is that 1+1, when you have entrepreneurial synergy together, doesn't equal 2. It doesn't equal 3. It could equal 4, 5, 10, or 20 by working together. And one of the great books that I read recently was Who Not How. And if you take a look at your company, it's everyone asks the question, how do I grow my income? How do I grow my business? How do I grow my freedom of time? How do I grow my freedom of relationship? If you're a how, you're one person. The real answer or the real question is, who do I need to collaborate with to grow my business or my income or my freedom of time or freedom of relationships? And it's always who, not how. And I think as we've learned through Fortune, we've learned that whoever creates the most value, it's very easy once you create value to figure out how to get paid. Bernie, Fortune birthed so many of these companies, from Oracare to TruBlu to Sequoia to Social Smile. Well, how do you think about that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, and that was really one of the goals. I see us at Fortune today as the connector company. So what we do for any dentist or vet is we connect them to a synergistic approach to financial services through Sequoia and Northeast Private Client Group. We connect them to Oracare. We connect them to TruBlu. We connect them to the banks that they need. We connect them, so it becomes a universe of companies, but all for the support of the same clients, right? And it delights me to see that.
Bob, Mark, there was a great presentation. I don't think you were at this meeting, but it was by Dr. Tarun Agarwal I think at one of the legacy Dentsply Sharona meetings, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I'm losing track of time, but he showed $1 million on the screen. It just said 1 million and it had 0.00. And his question is this: are you a decimal guy or are you a comma guy? Right? Because it literally is, in the entrepreneurial world, it's about commas. It's not about decimals, right? And in the business of dentistry, look, unfortunately, the clinicians have been trained aggressively that they need to measure success in microns and at levels that the human eye can't even see. That dedication and commitment, unfortunately, sometimes spills over into the business world. And the business side of it, directionally correct is better than precisely wrong every day of the week, right? And taking some action when you're 51% positive is better than doing nothing. And so I think it's that analysis paralysis that unfortunately gets in the way of some folks, because there's things. I mean, we had another one of your clients, right? He called and he said, it was a Sunday night. He said, I've been meaning to call you for 18 months. I need to take a look at my credit card processing. And he goes, I've been meaning to call you. And I said, fine. So he sent it. The next day, he's saving $22,000 a year. And he's like, oh gosh, why didn't I call? And I tell you, that's the devil on both sides, right? I'm thrilled. Hey, we saved you, but I'm pained, right? Like, oh my God, if I'd just been more persistent in getting you to engage earlier, right? So you want to deliver, but at the same time, it can be challenging when you find out, wow, that's a lot of money.
Well, I think as dentists, they do something to us in dental school. And like they say, hey, you're a clinician, you're not a business guy, and so then we get out, and if we make money, it's almost like a bad thing sometimes, but the better your practice is, the better services. I know Bernie once told me a long time ago, he says, you want to increase your production, or you want to increase your income, increase your standard of care. In other words, the better your standard of care is, the more money you'll make. So dentists, like for example, let's talk about Oracare. In my practices last year, we sell Oracare, of course, we believe in it. It's an alternative to chlorhexidine. Everyone hates chlorhexidine. Everyone. There's no doubt that it should not be used. But there's no alternative. Well, we created one. We saw a problem. We created this. In my practices, we've made passive income of profit of $96,000 last year, just selling Oracare. Okay.
Wow.
And that's just selling Oracare, doing nothing, not recommending it. We increased our standard of care because the patient went home and got a better service and getting results and everything. So we increased our standard of care, but along with that came profitability. So, when we talk oral care to people, we always talk to them about, how great it is. It doesn't stain, it's great on for periodontal patients, bad breath, all these different things, dry mouth. But what we don't tell them is this is your product. It's only sold to dentists. You can make money off of that, because we don't want to turn off the dentist, because sometimes they did something to our mind in school that says, oh, golly, I can't make money on this. Yeah, you can. Yes, you can, because you're increasing the standard of care. And I think, that's the way to do it. And I think you can make a profit. And it's funny because I always say, do you make a profit on your crown? They go, oh, yeah. Well, then you can make a profit on oral care too. So,
it's back to the same thing. It's okay to do good, doing good things for your patients. And you know what I love, Mark, about a podcast like this today is it really should remind us all of the power of synergy for a dentist. In other words, one of the things we say at Fortune is we say, trust the process. Trust the process. Because at this point, if they're getting good financial advice from your group, Mark, and they're on TruBlu and they're on OraCare and they've got Fortune growing the culture of their organization, and now they've got things like Social Smiles as well. And just if they did all of that, I don't see how a dentist fails. I really don't. And I'm speaking like the chairman of the board, right? But bottom line is I believe in it. And anyone who's ever asked me, they know how passionate, and passion is important here.
What is Social Smiles, Bernie?
Social Smiles is really tapping into probably the hottest, most credible type of marketing today, which is videomonials. And what makes it unique is that maybe half an hour after that patient leaves the office, they'll get a text or an email or whatever their communication of choice is. And it'll just ask them, would you like to record a 30-second, did you have a good experience? And if you did, would you be willing to do that? And we're willing to reward that patient for it. We'll give them a new Oral-B, or we'll $50 off their next visit, or teeth whitening, or whatever it is. And all they do is they hit a button and they record, God, what a great experience at Wilson Martino today. I think everyone should go to them if they're in the West Virginia. As soon as that's done, what makes it different is it goes and broadcasts to their whole social media community. So let's say they've got 1,000 Facebook friends. All 1,000 of them are going to get it. So it's pretty amazing, and it's never been done before. And I think our doctors are going to have an unfair advantage.
I think it's easy too. I think that's the key. Before, getting testimonials was so tough. Where do I put them? How do I go? This is so easy. It's just easy. I mean, it does it automatically. Like, you don't even touch it,
Well, Bob, hey, here's the great news. The team doesn't have to do it.
Yeah.
Because that's where the one of the issues in the past was, first of all, they were uncomfortable about asking for referrals, or uncomfortable about asking for a video, right? So now it bypasses them completely and goes right to right to them on their phone. So we have very high expectations for this.
And we'll have a press release probably in the next couple of weeks announcing the CEO of TruBlu Social Smiles, and we couldn't be more excited. We have absolutely the perfect person running that platform, right? And the dentists are going to benefit from that, because there's nobody more knowledgeable in dental marketing than this individual. So,
well, Alex, we can announce it right now because we announced it a week ago. And we've already got our first 100 dental offices in the pipeline to start. But Fred Joyle, who was the founder of 1-800-Dentist, this is circa 2022, 2023. This is the 1-800-Dentist. This is the next thing in marketing. And he's written 3 books on marketing. So we're all really excited about it.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I've already asked you guys in advance, so you can't back out now. But one of the the giveaways in my new book is I'm going to ask you guys each to participate in a master class for our doctors. And the master class is going to be how to get into the business owner mindset and to think entrepreneurially. And I can't think of three better CEOs than the three of you. And just, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for just giving so much, for always serving, for always being at your best when you're serving others. I think that's one of the many things we have in common. And just thank you for your time today, guys.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again. Thanks, everybody.